Community members, welcome to our event this evening, Celebrating Life, I Survived, I Overcame. This afternoon, this evening, we will focus on looking at mental health, which is part of DBGM's mission. Our work is focused on mental health. This evening's program, we will talk about, it's a virtual gathering for those who have survived suicide ideation or thoughts and attempts. And we will try to hear some survivors, some suicide survivor family stories. That is maybe from people, families of community members who've taken their lives, to hear the stories from them about what that death meant for their lives and how it impacted them. During this evening's program, as you can see here, we will first begin with a memorial remembering our community members who've died in the last year. And then Alex Hardy with GetSomeJoy organization will read for us 2 poems by Nigel Hughes. And then we expect that Fabian Laveau from Prizm Shyne Project in Atlanta will join us to talk about their story. And then Shana Riley from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention will share with us a presentation about talking to save lives, especially for LGBTQ+ people of color. And then Alex will come back again to read for us an excerpt from James Baldwin's Another Country, focusing on Rufus's last few minutes or hour and a half or thereabouts before he takes his life. And then towards the end, we will have a presentation by Akua, Boakye-Yiadom, Denise Balzer, and Katarina Gaylord from the New York State Office of Mental Health, who will talk to us about 988, a new suicide and mental health crisis hotline. So before we go on much further, of course, we always have to do these little bit of housekeeping kind of things. So a lot of us have been doing Zoom now for more than a year. But one of the things that I'd like us to pay particular attention to is mental health professionals being available. This is a really heavy kind of provoking, stimulating discussion about something that we have for centuries kept hidden, kept private, been afraid to talk about, and it can make us uncomfortable. If at any time there are any community members who are feeling overwhelmed by a memory or by something that's said during this forum and need to speak with someone, please reach out to any of the mental health professionals who are on the Zoom, are in this forum. Reach out to them in a private message, and send them a chat to talk with them to be able to get the help that you would like to help you through this moment. So community members, I'd like to welcome Alex Hardy. Alex is a grits-powered writer, mental health advocate, home cook, facilitator, and lupus survivor. He battles spiritual ashiness and as the co-founder of GetSomeJoy, a creative wellness agency that supports organizations and community with joy-infused training, experiences, and resources. He wrote for Ebony, CNN.com, Food and Wine, The Root, St. Heron, Eater, and Very Smart Brothers. He's an adult, youth, and Spanish-speaking mental health first aid instructor and recently led a 4-week literary therapy writing series that explored joy, grief, pleasure, and growth with more than 350 people from 12 plus countries. Alexander shares recipes, joy-flavored stories, and wellness tools Monday through Friday via GetSomeJoy's daily breakfast situation at medium.com/GetSomeJoy. He does not believe in snow or Delaware. He can be found at Twitter at Chris Alexander _/ at -GetSomeJoy, Instagram, Alex Gotta Eat at GetSomeJoy, and his website is thealexanderhardy.com. Alex?
Hello. I'll be reading Two Blue by Langston Hughes. I got those sad old weary blues. I don't know where to turn. I don't know where to go. Nobody cares about you when you sink so low. What shall I say? What shall I do? Shall I take a gun and put myself away? I wonder if one bullet would do. Hard as my head is, it would probably take 2. But I ain't got neither bullet nor gun, and I'm too blue to look for one. The second poem I'll be sharing today is Still Here by Langston Hughes as well. I've been scarred and battered. My hopes the wind done scattered. Snow has frizzed me, sun has baked me. Looks like between them, they done tried to make me stop laughing, stop loving, stop living. But I don't care, I'm still here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I don't know if Fabian is here. Fabian, are you here? Okay, I take it that Fabian is not here. So let's move on to the next presenter, Shashana. I sure that I just screwed up her name. Please,
you said the full first name. It's okay.
So Shashana Riley is a native New Yorker from the Boogie Down Bronx. And since 2017, this is not cooperating as it should. Right. Shashana Riley is a native New Yorker from the Boakye-Yiadom Bronx. Since 2017, she served as an active volunteer with the New York City chapter for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP. She is in the process of completing her undergraduate degree in criminal justice with a concentration on forming alternatives to incarceration and creating restorative juvenile justice. Dance Comes in the Morning is Shahana's personal philosophy. This systematic view has been pivotal throughout her healing journey after multiple losses to suicide, which shaped her ability to connect with other survivors and assist in creating pathways to healing. Noting the importance of self-care, Shahana finds joy in being the cool auntie with her nieces and nephews, shooting a game of pool or taking a nap. Shashana, you want to go ahead and share?
Yes, thank you so much for that. I'm going to share my screen right now. And 2, 1. Okay, everybody can see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm making sure. Okay, so again, thank you so much. Good evening to all. And once again, thank you for the introduction into DBGM for having me here today. And I apologize for my technical difficulties and hope my picture is looking amazing and that will suffice, for the evening. The TSL LGBT Talk Save Lives is normally a 60-minute presentation. And in trying to maintain integrity of the information, it is a struggle, but it was doable. But before we continue, I'm going to share a short video of a trans female named Josie and her story of suicide, seeking support, and finding hope.
Suicide's a very deep personal issue for me, as I know it affects so many, just like it's affected me. But I'm also here, and I love to explain to people that there's always hope. Suicide is preventable. Suicide can be detected. It's a health condition. Mental health needs to be talked about. We need to end that stigma. I didn't ever find people that talked about suicide or prevention of suicide or depression or anxiety. And someone that struggled being transgender, not even knowing that term till later in life, suicide and depression played major roles throughout my entire life. My first attempt was at the age of 8, and the last thing I ever want is another child at that age thinking that's the only option. I felt like I was in this deep, dark, muddy, murky, just god-awful spot, and nothing I did was pulling me out of it. When I first started trying to figure out who I was and started to find some things, even then it was all the negative that I saw. Knowing that if I transitioned, that I was going to lose a ton of people. Knowing that if I transitioned, I wasn't sure how my 2 girls were going to react. Knowing by transitioning that the reality was I was probably giving up walking my girls down the aisle when they get married. Those were all things that almost made me stop from transitioning and finding the happiness that I found. Once again, that's where the counselor helped me work through that and see that there was a lot more hope to it than those negatives that I was focusing on. Instead of this society model that we've built that you always have to be strong, you always have to be this independent person, you don't accept help, that's a sign of weakness, and that's just not true. And I think that's one thing that just as individuals we have to help break, and it will spread out. People see it and they pick it up, and if you aren't afraid to ask for help, you're actually stronger, because it's a sign of strength instead of a sign of weakness. And I think it's getting that mentality changed. Not everybody needs a counselor. Sometimes it is that friend, sometimes it's the family. You have to find who works for you, who's going to call you out on things, who's going to help you process things. When you find that, it's amazing the strength that will come out of that. And that was the case with me. I had an amazing counselor that helped me process things, helped me process all my childhood trauma that I went through, my military trauma that I went through, and helped me find who I was. As a result, I love life. I see life in color. It's amazing, and I want that for everyone. I want everybody to see how beautiful life can be and enjoy it with each other. So
Okay, and I hope that Josie sharing her story was able to resonate with the people, everyone here. And I'm going to now just jump to the risk factors of those most likely considering taking their life when it comes to suicidal ideation and suicidal deaths. So the first three things that we actually look for are going to be health, historical, and environmental. These are, these are based on research, and these are the known factors that converge in a person's life and put them at increased risk. And as with other health issues, prevention can start early, well in advance of a crisis, and while other prevention strategies can occur closer to the time of crisis. Time, it can be and is a critical life-saving measure, and life can be saved if you allow time for the person's suicide risk to subside or get through that period of distress. When it comes to the LGBTQ specific risk factors, we will look into what we see here. So to a higher degree of the risk factors that contribute to a higher degree for LGBTQ community include social isolation and low self-esteem, substance abuse, depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues that can often result from or become worsened by stigma and discrimination. Other specific risk factors include family rejection, bullying, cyberbullying, laws and public policies that reinforce stigma and discrimination, as well as the lack of laws and policies that protect against discrimination. But this also includes the more general health factors, such as biological and psychological factors, the most significant of which are mental health conditions, since there are proven interventions like therapy and medication that can help manage mental health conditions. Depression is the most common mental health condition and the one that is most associated with suicide. Bipolar disorder has also been shown to increase risk, even though it is less common than depression. Other mental conditions that elevate are these anxiety, personality disorders, psychosis, and substance use disorders. When related to years of discrimination, threats of violence, and other disparities that the LGBTQ community faces, the prevalence of mental health conditions and substance use disorders is much higher among the LGBT population than the general. We also look at historical risk factors such as a family history of suicide, family history of mental health conditions, and past trauma such as childhood abuse or combat stress. We also need to take in consideration domestic violence within some LGBT relationships. Previous suicide attempts are also considered to be historical risk factors and put a person at greater risk. It's important to note that more than 90% of people who attempt suicide do not go on to die by suicide. So just because they have made an attempt previously, that does not mean that they will ultimately die by suicide. The third type of suicide risk factor is environmental. So environmental risk factors include the circumstances of a person's life, and those are the aspects that can contribute to their overall level of risk. For example, having access to a method of killing oneself is referred to as access to lethal means and is an environmental factor. Research has shown that suicide contagion, which is the exposure to another person's suicide, or to graphic or sensationalized accounts of suicide, particularly for individuals who have suicide risk factors, such as depression or past trauma, can increase the risk. We also have to consider other environmental factors, such as prolonged stress, harassment, bullying, ongoing relationship problems, legal problems, or unemployment and stressful life events such as the divorce, death of a loved one, job loss, or even such quote unquote happy events such as getting married, obtaining a new job, finding a new place. Although everyone faces stressful life events, members of the LGBT community can be continually exposed to harsh circumstances merely because of their gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. These stressors, when added to existing risk factors, can increase vulnerability for feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, or thoughts of suicide. And while many of those factors we discuss over a longer period of time, there are warning signs that are observable that signal suicidal risk in the near future. And it's important to note that the warning signs are not always obvious. Warning signs can also vary from person to person. As I like to say, depression and other issues are as individual as the person that has them. Even if we may be able to resonate and relate, they're always going to be, I don't believe in treating them as cookie cutter. Warning signs, Learning from the warning signs can help someone recognize when someone is in mental health distress or having suicidal thoughts. They are typically displayed in three main ways that we can detect: talk, behavior, and mood. Talk can include constantly speaking of killing oneself, even sometimes attempting to make it sound as if a joke. A person may sometimes consistently talk of feeling hopeless. They may also speak on feeling overwhelmed to the point of not seeing a way out of their situation or multiple situations. They can also talk about feeling like a burden. Behavior can include giving away possessions that they normally would not have. There could be changes in sleeping patterns, sleeping too much, or not sleeping enough. There can also be taken into consideration spending money. There are some times where people will start going through their bank accounts and going shopping or buying things, and that can be an indication. Another thing to look out for might be relief and happiness after a long period of talking about taking their life or even going through a depressive episode. Sometimes that can indicate relief of creating a plan for the person and them feeling relief that their life in their mind and their feelings will soon be over. As it pertains to mood, we have to look into irritability, aggression, feelings of dejection, or other feelings or other various symptoms that might be outside of their normal, quote unquote, pattern of behavior. And with this better understanding of the risk and warning signs, we will focus on prevention. And we will discuss the different types of protective factors with a focus on mental health, the importance of engaging in self-care, and the need to provide support for suicide loss survivors and those with lived experience. LGBTQ specific protective factors have been shown in studies to help reduce the likelihood of suicide attempts and suicide deaths within the community. Some of the examples are, as you can see here, include family acceptance and affirmation, including the using someone's correct pronouns, reducing stigma, prejudice, bullying, and LGBTQ victimization, increasing access to LGBTQ affirming mental and physical health care, and increasing legal protections for the LGBTQ community. And there are several ways to approach finding an LGBTQ affirming and competent mental health professional. First, consider your needs and what is important to you. It is helpful to think about finding a therapist that works like a dating relationship. And sometimes it will be the right match and sometimes it won't. This can be due to different factors, including timing, the type of therapy practice, and the connection between a therapist and the person seeking help. And if you or someone feels like therapy doesn't work for them, it may be worth trying again with a new therapist. When looking for a new therapist, it's beneficial to think about the different characteristics that you hope to find in a therapist, and in knowing what you want, whether that is someone that practices a particular therapeutic approach or someone with a particular gender identity or ethnicity, can help you find a therapy relationship that works for you. And it's just important to remember that you feel comfortable talking to your therapist and that you trust them. When talking to a new therapist, Let them know your concerns and previous experiences with mental health care. Because therapy is most beneficial when you find a therapist, it's important to do research, and that can be a difficult process, but worthwhile. It's important to give up if you have to go through, a few different providers, and remember to ask questions. Here are examples of some questions that may be helpful to ask. And it can also be helpful to specify what you're not looking for. If a therapist provides conversion therapy or reparative therapy, therapy is widely known to cause harm to the LGBTQ community, then that is the indication that that therapist is not going to be helpful to you. It will and may take time to find a provider who is the right fit. And if one you speak with does not meet your needs, continue your search to find one who does. At the same time, remember to be open and give yourself and your new therapist a chance to get comfortable and see if the relationship will work. This might take a few sessions. No matter what, don't give up. Therapy is an excellent and proven way to manage mental health. And feel free to take a picture of the slide if you'd like to have these questions on hand for reference. Having positive and supportive relationships, whether they be a chosen family, friends, LGBTQ affirming local groups, or online forums, can help protect against suicide risk. And additionally, LGBTQ affirming local groups and online forums provide people a place of purpose and provide a sense of identity, all of which helps give people meaning and reasons for living. Social support also means setting boundaries and staying away from the people who make you feel worse. So now that we've reviewed those risk factors, we're just going to cover what we all can do to help prevent suicide. As discussed earlier, the suicide warning signs typically display in three main ways: through a person's talk, their behavior, and moods. And they can be subtle and vary from person to person. They can also be present long before risk is high, so it's a good idea to have a regular conversation about mental health. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. When you initiate the conversation, these are some things to avoid when talking about someone experiencing suicidal thinking and behavior. Avoid minimizing their feelings, because trying to convince them that life is worth living. Avoid advice to fix it. Most people that are suicidal are very ambivalent about taking their life. Part of them wants to die, a part of them wants to live. And sometimes when they're in a crisis, the part of them that wants to die is at the forefront, so they're not really trying to hear all of the philosophical debates or the things where you're trying to convince. Even in our worry, if we're just, because we are concerned, sometimes we try to make them think about the people that will be hurt with their loss. But again, that doesn't help. It's usually going to push them further down a hole. And it's just going to make them shut down and avoid trying to speak to you or speak to anyone else. Avoid giving advice to fix it, because if a person is having a heart attack, you're not going to tell them in the moment of crisis to start exercising or to eat a healthier diet. Listen and connect them with help. Listen to their story. Let them cry if they need to, but just remember, it just takes time. It needs time. They need time in the moment of their crisis to get, in order to get away from the feelings of their ideation. Help take active steps in keeping them and their environment safe. If you are able to, stay with them, don't leave them alone, and help them remove the lethal means or remove themselves from a potentially dangerous area. Escort them to mental health services or an emergency room. But if the situation puts your own safety at risk, leave the area immediately and call emergency services. While 911 is the current emergency system in the US, we at AFSP, are advocating for more appropriate mental health crisis services to become the system that responds in mental health emergencies. Other emergency alternatives include the Trans Lifeline, which will not call 911. You can also look into mobile crisis units that provide same-day intervention to people experiencing mental health and issues in the community. Calls are responded to on-site, at home, work, school, by licensed mental health professionals with the goal of preventing a crisis from becoming an emergency and referring the client to the proper resources. And one of the most important things we can learn about mental health crisis resources is our learning about the resources in advance. So we have both the Trans Lifeline and the Trevor Project Hotline, which are meant for specific groups within the LGBTQ community. The Trans Hotline is meant to help trans and questioning people get the resources they need. And they also have a friends and family hotline for those who want to support their trans or questioning loved ones. The Trevor Project Hotline is meant for LGBTQ youth and those who support them and has talk and text features. We also have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, Lifeline, and Crisis Text Line, which are available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and 366 on a leap year. Responders for both services are trained to support individuals in distress, but can also provide guidance for how you can support someone you're concerned about. In addition to becoming familiar with crisis resources, it's great to learn about ongoing resources that you can look to for support. You can visit a primary care provider, a psychiatric hospital, and walk-in clinics for support. Therapy can also serve as an ongoing way to manage one's mental health. A mental health provider can be found by going to mentalhealth.america.net, and you can also go to the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network to find a mental health provider who is a person of color and a member of the LGBTQ community. There are also additional mental health resources for Black, Native, and Indigenous, AAPI, and Latinx communities, because as previously mentioned, multiple marginalized identities can compound the risk for suicide attempts, so it's important to have resources that speak to the specific experiences of racial and ethnic minorities. I know we don't have it up here, but we can also make sure that we distribute family acceptance posters, which are research-based posters, to educate family members, providers, religious leaders, and other members of the community about the critical role of family support for LGBTQ children and youth and adults to prevent suicide. Thank you so much for letting me give this presentation, and I hope you learned a little bit. If there's ever a point in time where you would like a longer presentation, please feel free to reach out, and that can be facilitated as well. And these are the social media networks for AFSP National. And there is also social media for AFSP, the NYC chapter. And if you ever want to volunteer or anything, feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much, Shana. This is actually really quite important information. I'd just like us to take a moment while Fabian is here with us. So we'd like to welcome Fabian Laveau. Is a Black trans man from Travis Air Force Base in California. He is a music producer, filmmaker, and community advocate from Conley, Georgia. For more than 25 years, he was in the performing arts and is a natural-born creative. Fabian took his talents and created a film and music company, Eman Mark Studios, LLC, that is focused on uplifting BIPOC, TGNC communities in an all-inclusive environment through upcoming projects created to enhance these communities. He is the founder and executive director of the Prizm Shyne Project, which focuses on wellness, healing, and for the economic betterment and value of the community through programs that provide funding and the tools small businesses and artists need to thrive. Fabian believes that providing space for mental health is key to creating a better tomorrow for community members. So community members, I'd like us to welcome Fabian Laveau, who will share their experience with us. Fabian, are you there?
Yes. Hi, how are you doing?
Good, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I went through a very dark time in my life, but a major shift that I wasn't expecting to be when I relocated down into Georgia. I had some, unfortunate events that occurred. Like before I came, I was a regional manager with free phone services like SafeLink and Assurance Wireless. I just got my regional management position, and I went to Georgia to, I was so excited to thrive and do everything I wanted to do. Things didn't work out, so I got involved with, different things, and I really wanted to get into working with community, but unfortunately, at the time, I it wasn't it wasn't a healthy experience. But at me sitting here right now before you, I could tell you it changed my life. I went through some things, I had some struggles, but I came out on top in a sense that I learned new ways of thinking and realizing what some of our key focuses need to be within the BIPOC TGNC community and the TGNC community in general. And that's mental health and focusing on mental health and wellness and proper support. Like when people come to you in a low state, low self-esteem, depression, like we're very vulnerable, and we all deserve the proper care and support around us that we want to give. A lot of us have the biggest hearts and we give the most, and it's been several cases where I didn't get that back. About 2 years ago, somebody I had grown to trust in, in friendships, and I'm just for disclosure, I'm not mentioning any names, but I almost served 10 years of prison for a lie in the court of law. And the one thing this person said they would never do was weaponize their privilege. And they did just that. And long story short, in that situation, I was by myself. So I was in my head so much, and it was just things were just going wrong and they were going downhill. I didn't feel comfortable enough to open up and talk to anybody because I felt like me opening up and displaying my vulnerability, I was being judged, instead of being helped, made fun of, laughed at. So, and I know I'm not the only one. So I know this could touch somebody. I had to step out of myself and really work on getting out of my head after this. There's so many things happening at one time, and facing homelessness and like literally struggling to live. Like folks didn't know, like when I really started getting into my business, I did not have a residence. I did not have a permanent residence. I didn't have the opportunities with the people I was working with that I should have, and that's okay. That's okay. But the long story short, it came to a point where I was afraid to go out because one night I was at a train station and I got some bad news. And the heat of the moment, I heard the train coming, and and this is the first time I'm sharing this. Like I'm just learning how to open, so just bear with me, okay? I'm kind of nervous. It didn't match up. Like my body was in shock, and I felt myself going towards the train tracks. In my mind, I was just like, what am I doing? So I broke out in an anxiety attack. There's a cop right there actually stuck right in front of me and made me sit with him for a while. But after that, like I kept to myself for a while. I was afraid to, again, say something because I didn't want to be perceived as weak. And a lot of my healing I had to do by myself before I actually got professional help to get to that point, and just learning how to really go about the system and making sure I know how to handle my own business, you know, and trying to think clearly and stay focused and stress constantly. But to say all of that, I'm saying this, like, you don't know what anybody may be going through, you know? You don't know what their story is. You don't know how they're getting there. All you're seeing is the finished product. So it's like your strong friends, and I've been told several times, I thank God I'm strong. But your strong friends, check on them constantly. Let them know that you love them too. Those friends that does everything for everybody, you know, you're always seeing them showing love to everyone, giving everybody advice. Sometimes those friends need advice, because it's easy to help a situation outward looking in, but it's a different effect when it's to be received, when you're used to being the strong person for everybody, you know? So we all should work on that. Through that, I got into, and it's a few things. With Imam Mark Studios, I want to create an all-inclusive space with an all-inclusive policy from Jump Street, that everybody knows that when they come in to create and collaborate with this company, that they're going to be respected for who they are. They're going to be respected even more for their creativity and what they bring to whatever we are making, you know? And in this way, we're all coming up and building our careers to thrive in areas that we didn't have before. And like attributing to what the folks that are out here doing, you know? There's many stories to all of us, and there's no one way to tell them all. But when we are open like this, we're able to touch the hearts and let folks know it is okay. It's not okay right now. You're getting through it. Think about it. That's one thing my therapist instilled in me too. And it's a thought process I had for a while, but like I said, when things get shaky, you have to be reminded. Think of solutions. Like with my anxiety, if I'm feeling like any type of way, I'll go and turn on some jazz music. Certain frequencies even help, you know? And I'm talking about this now because I'm getting into my studies. I'm going back to school as well for psychology and music therapy. So I'm going to contribute as much as I possibly can. And the Prizm Shyne Project, with mental wellness, holistic healing, we can really get folks in tune with working on themselves. Sometimes we need that guidance. We need to know the process, to find an understanding on how to look into the process, to do your own research. You know what I'm saying? To even some folks are not, so no disrespect, but stepping into your spiritual self. Like there's so many different ways to grow. And looking at the past, like I said, it's a crazy story. But looking into the past and what I've been through, instead of being a victim, I paid attention to the gray areas. I still looked at the things that were great. And I just know people aren't perfect. We make bad decisions. We do things we regret, but as human beings, that's what we do. We learn from our mistakes, hopefully, and progress and change and make better. And though I still have my times, like I wake up, like I'm just like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit here. I want to go back to sleep. Those are the times I push myself and I look at the walls and my affirmations, and I remind myself of what I have done and continue to encourage myself. You got to be your biggest cheerleader. Look in the mirror in the morning and say, I am great. I'm abundant. I can do anything. And it's just changing a mindset for me and really not just preaching to the choir and walking in my faith. Like that has been the game changer. And I'm grateful for the lessons, like I said, and the opportunity to take that and create something beautiful that can impact the community. But if anybody has any questions for me, feel free now. Thank you for listening. And that was a little difficult, but it feels good to finally actually be able to talk about it.
Thank you very much, Fabian, for sharing that.
Thank you for having me.
One of the things that I liked about what you were sharing just now is not so much, I'm not asking a question, but it's about just adding to your story a bit of my own story. There are many similarities. And one of the things that I think we have to, one of the things, and Shashana was talking about it earlier in her presentation, that inhibits a lot of us is shame and stigma surrounding mental health. And our society feels that when we are struggling with mental health and we may feel suicidal, or we may have attempted it, or we think about it, that we are weak, we are less than, we are nothing. And society dismisses us because of that. And I'm sure there are a couple of people who are present here tonight who will tell you that I am anything but weak. Because when I stood on the edge of the subway platform of 34th Street in 1999, it was the thought of my mother that prevented me from going forward. And I was also very deeply aware that I had only just come to this country, and I had no one to turn to. I did not know who to talk to, because in the Guyanese community, you don't talk about stuff like this. And that is why I started this organization. And that is why I do this work. Because no other Black man should ever have to feel that there are no other options, that there's always a choice, there's always an option. So it was difficult for you to share some stuff tonight, Fabian, and thank you. I know there are a lot of other people who are joining us tonight for this forum who may themselves have experienced moments when they just thought that was the end. Or they may have known of people in their lives, family members or close friends, who may have completed their suicide or may have stopped short. I think one of the important things is to know, and the reason I'm sharing this is also to realize that very often we think that we are alone when we are going through whatever it is that we're going through. And very often, we are not alone. Because unless you had shared your story as you did just now, I would not have known that you had a similar experience to mine. And I don't know how many other people may have similar experiences. I'm not suggesting that this becomes a pity party, but it becomes an opportunity for us to share some of our common experiences, because then we realize we are not alone. Okay? So thank you very much again for that, sharing that, Fabian. And I'd now like to move on and
Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry, yes?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you for having me. I appreciate the space and the time.
Certainly, certainly. I'd now like us to move on to Alex, who will read for us a work from James Baldwin's Rufus. Alex?
Thank you. Thank you all again for being here and just for the vulnerability and just the love being shared in this space. The piece I'm about to share comes from another country. And I didn't realize until I was preparing to read it how close I have been to this exact moment. So again, I appreciate everyone who's been vulnerable enough and brave enough to share, what they've experienced, because it does no good for us to pretend that, none of us have been through hard times. Okay. He passed Cornelia Street. Eric had lived there once. He saw again that apartment, the lamplight in the corners, Eric under the light, books falling over everything, and the bed unmade. Eric, and he was on 6th Avenue, traffic lights and the lights of taxis blazing around him. 2 girls and 2 boys, white, stood on the opposite corner, waiting for the lights to change. Half a dozen men in a heavy gleaming car rolled by and shouted at them. Then there was someone at his shoulder, a young white boy in a vaguely military cap and the black leather jacket. He looked at Rufus with the greatest hostility and then started slowly down the avenue away from him, waving his rump like a flag. He looked back, stopped beneath the marquee of a movie theater. The lights changed. Rufus and the 2 couples started toward each other, came abreast in the middle of the avenue, passed. Only one of the girls looked at him with a kind of pitying wonder in her eyes. All right, bitch. He started toward 8th Street for no reason. He was simply putting off his subway ride. Then he stood at the subway steps, looking down. For a wonder, especially at this hour, there was no one on the steps. The steps were empty. He wondered if the man in the booth would change his $5 bill. He stared down. Then, as the man gave him change and he moved toward the turnstile, other people came, rushing and loud, pushing past him as though they were swimmers and he nothing but an upright pole in the water. Then something began to awaken in him. Something new. It increased his distance. It increased his pain. They were rushing to the platform, to the tracks. Something he had not thought of for many years, something he had never ceased to think of, came back to him as he walked behind the crowd. The subway platform was a dangerous place, so he had always thought. It sloped downward toward the waiting tracks, and when he had been a little boy and stood on the platform beside his mother, he had not dared let go her hand. He stood on the platform now, alone, with all these people who were each of them alone, and waited in a quiet calmness for the train. But suppose something somewhere failed and the yellow lights went out and no one else could see any longer the platform's edge. Suppose these beams fell down. He saw the train in the tunnel, excuse me, rushing underwater, the motorman gone mad, gone blind, unable to decipher the lights, and the tracks gleaming and snarling senselessly upward forever. The train never stopping and the people screaming at the windows and the doors and turning on each other with all of the accumulated fury of their blasphemed lives, everything gone out of them but murder, breaking limb from limb and splashing in blood with joy for the first time, joy, joy, after such long sentence in chains, leaping out to astound the world again. Or the train in the tunnel, the water outside, the power failing, the water coming in and the water not rising like a flood, but breaking like a wave over the heads of these people, filling their mouths, filling their eyes, their hair, tearing away their clothes and discovering the secrecy which only water by now could use. It could happen. It could happen. And he would have loved to see it happen, even if he perished too. The train came in, filling the great scar of the tracks. They all got on, sitting in the lighted car, which was far from empty, which would be choked with people before they got very far uptown, and stood or sat in the isolation cell into which they transformed every inch of the space they held. The train stopped at 14th Street. He was sitting at the window and he watched a few people get on. There was a colored girl among them who looked a little like his sister, but she looked at him and looked away and sat down as far from him as she could. The train rolled on through the tunnel. The next stop was 34th Street, his stop. People got on. He watched the stop roll by. 42nd Street. This time a crowd got on, some of them carrying papers, and there was no seats left. A white man leaned on a strap near him. Rufus felt his gorge rise. At 59th Street, many came on board and many rushed across the platform to the waiting local. Many white people and many Black people chained together in time and space and by history, and all of them in a hurry. In a hurry to get away from each other, he thought. But we ain't never gonna make it. We've been fucked for fair. The doors slammed, a loud sound, and it made him jump. The train, as though protesting its heavier burden, as though protesting the proximity of white buttock to Black knee, groaned, lurched. The wheels seemed to scrape the track, making a tearing sound. Then it began to move uptown, where the masses would divide and the load became lighter. Lights flared and teetered by, and they passed other platforms where people waited for other trains. Then they had the tunnel to themselves. The train rushed into the blackness with a phallic abandon, into the blackness which opened to receive it, opened, opened, the whole world shook with their coupling. Then, when it seemed that the roar and the lights, when it seemed that the roar and the movement would never cease, they came into the bright lights of 125th Street. The train gasped and moaned to a halt. He had thought he would get off there, but he watched the people move toward the door, watched the doors open, watched them leave. It was mainly Black people who left. He had thought that he would get off here and go home, but he watched the girl who reminded him of his sister as she moved suddenly past white people and stood for a moment on the platform before walking toward the steps. Suddenly he knew that he was never going home anymore. The train began to move, half empty now, and with each stop it became lighter. Soon the white people who were left looked at him oddly. He felt their stares, but he felt far away from them. You took the best, so why not take the rest? He got off at the train station, named for the bridge built to honor the father of this country, and walked up the steps into the streets, which were empty. Tall apartment buildings, lightless, loomed against the dark sky and seemed to be watching him, seemed to be pressing down on him. The bridge was heavy over his head, intolerably high, but he did not yet see the water. He felt it, he smelt it. He thought how he had never been understood. He had never before understood how an animal could smell water, but it was over there, past the highway, where he could see the speeding cars. Then he stood on the bridge, looking over, looking down. Now, the lights of the cars on the highway seemed to be writing an endless message, writing an awful speed in a fine, unreadable script. There were muted lights on the Jersey shore, and here and there, a neon flame advertising something someone had for sale. He began to walk slowly to the center of the bridge, observing that from this height, the city which had been so dark as he walked through it seemed to be on fire. He stood at the center of the bridge, and it was freezing cold. He raised his eyes to heaven. He thought, you bastard, you motherfucking bastard. Ain't I your baby too? He began to cry. Something in Rufus, which could not break, shook him like a rag doll and splashed water all over his face and filled his throat and his nostrils with anguish. He knew the pain would never stop. He could never go down into the city again. He dropped his head as though someone had struck him and looked down at the water. It was cold, and the water would be cold. He was black, and the water was black. He lifted himself by his hands on the rail, lifted himself as high as he could, and leaned far out. The wind tore at him, his head and his shoulders, while something in him screamed, why? Why? He thought of Eric. His straining arms threatened to break. I can't make it this way. He thought of Ida. He whispered, I'm sorry, Leona. And then the wind took him. He felt himself going over, head down. The wind, the stars, the lights, the water, all rolled over. All right. He felt a shoe fly off behind him, and there was nothing around him, only the wind. All right, you motherfucking God almighty bastard, I'm coming to you. And that was from James Baldwin's Another Country.
Thank you very much, Alex, for reading that excerpt and sharing this account with us. Let's just take a moment. For many of us, as we think about our own lives, how close we may have come. Why did we stop? What made us stop? Would we try it again? Why would we try it again? If we're not going to try it again, did we resolve some of the issues and the problems and the things in our lives that made us want to do it the first time? I can share, continuing from my story earlier, is that I have undertaken the task of identifying some of the issues that I needed to resolve in my life so that I don't come close to doing that again. So thank you for sharing that, Alex. And one of the things I think is so very clear to all of us is maybe how similar many of our stories are, how shared those stories that we have, that we are not alone. And the fact that I can sit here and we can spend this time reminds me again that I am not alone. So thank you again for sharing that excerpt with us, Alex. I'd like us now to move on to the other part of this program, which is inviting 3 community members from so our next presenter representing the State Office of Mental Health will begin with this. It's a team of 3 represented by Akua Boakye-Yiadom, who has spent several years in public service focusing on community health, health promotion, and prevention. She facilitated behavioral health and mental health first aid presentations and training workshops in New York City and is currently focused on New York State policy and planning. Akua is a member of the Crisis Services team at the Office of Mental Health and is working collaboratively to implement a comprehensive crisis response system in the New York State Office of Mental Health. Joining Akua is Denise Balzer. She's a licensed clinical social worker who's worked for more than 30 years in social work and human services, from residential treatment for children and adolescents, managed care and yoga, to New York State policy and planning. Currently, she works with a team of state partners to implement a comprehensive crisis response system being led by New York State Office of Mental Health. And finally, as part of that team is Katarina Gaylord, also a licensed master's in social work, who spent the past 15 years of her career focused on improving coordination and access to behavioral health services for adults and children living with mental health and or substance use challenges. She possesses behavioral health experience in residential, inpatient, crisis, community rehabilitation, care coordination, and most recently, policy and planning. She's a member of the Office of Mental Health's team working on the implementation of a comprehensive crisis response system in New York State. Community members, I'd like us to welcome Akua, Denise, and Katerina.
Thank you so much, Antoine, Shana, Alex, and Fabian. Usually when we do these presentations, it's in a very kind of sterile environment where we just offer information. But tonight is really a privilege for us. I was so moved by your stories. I'm also an emotional person, so I try not to be, that it reminds me of why I do what I do, So one of the things that we have talked about in the development of comprehensive crisis services in New York State, and one of the things that we have led with our colleagues is that we are doing this for people. We're not doing this, to maintain a system that hasn't been helpful, that doesn't listen to the people that it serves, and that this is something that we want to make sure that we're working toward, that this is an important time in our lives, that we have resources and time and the ability to hear the voices of folks that are going to use our services, that want to, that never have thought about it in their lives. So I really appreciate this opportunity, and it is truly a privilege to be here and hear from all of you, and a good reminder, because sometimes you need a good reminder to stay on the right track. So what we've been doing is looking at the development of comprehensive crisis response services across New York State. Now, there are many services that are available, but they aren't connected in a way that makes it easy for individuals who want to access services to be connected with them. And it could be therapy services, it could be community services, it could be housing, it could be whatever someone identifies that they need to help support them moving forward, to help manage whatever it is that has created some distress in their lives. So one of the things that we're doing that is part of this comprehensive crisis response system is the implementation of 988, which is a 3-digit behavioral health and suicide prevention number. It is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, but it gives us the opportunity to expand on what the Lifeline may offer and create opportunities for anyone in New York State to call and get support for when they're in distress or in crisis or need connection to services or supports. So I'm going to let Kat talk a little bit more about 988 and the opportunities for people to utilize it in New York. So thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. My name is Katarina Gaylord, and as Denise mentioned, I work with the Office of Mental Health on the 988 project. And I just want to start by saying thank you for inviting me here and allowing us the opportunity to share with you what we are hoping to create in New York to be able to provide you and your loved ones the hope that it sounds like we all could use on a daily basis when feeling like there may be no hope. 988, by nature of a crisis response system, we are designing the system to be responsive. And in order for it to be a responsive system, it's important for us to know and understand why a person would utilize a system like this to be able to call somebody and receive support and counseling and anonymity if that's what they desire. And the ability to have in return options and support and somebody to listen when they may feel that there is nobody who might understand or there isn't anybody else available to speak because you don't want to trouble them with your worries or your troubles or burden them with what's troubling you. So what we are looking at with 988 as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is to better coordinate the systems within New York so that when somebody calls in for a behavioral health crisis, and it's not just a suicidal crisis, it could be any crisis that you define, that your loved one defines, that your family member defines, because what's bothering somebody in a moment is unique and personal to that individual. And there is no one who can tell you that that's not important and that's not good reason to reach out. And so the trained counselors who will be responding to the 988 calls are exactly that, trained to be able to meet an individual where they're at and walk with them along what's bringing them to that call and help them sort out what their options are. Sometimes when an individual reaches out to a hotline or for assistance, they might know what that next step is for them and just need to be able to talk through some options, or they might not. They may not understand why they're feeling the way they're feeling or how to get to a space where they're not feeling that way any longer. So with 988, the trained counselors will offer an individualized, personalized intervention to be able to walk somebody through how they're feeling. And then if that person is comfortable, be able to share perhaps where they are, to be able to be linked to services in your community if one chooses to, so that when the call ends, the person isn't necessarily feeling like that was it, that there are still options beyond a phone call for somebody to rely on. There's also the ability, which we are really love about 988, is the follow-up piece of that. So often when somebody makes that step, that very brave step to reach out and say, I'm not feeling well, I need help, this doesn't feel right, I don't want to feel this way, that when the phone call ends, some people think, well, what now? What next? That helped, but what if I feel bad again? What if I don't have somebody to talk to? 988 is available 24/7 and every day of the year. And I think, Shana, I'm sorry if I said it incorrectly, said it earlier, even on the leap year, so 366 days a year. So it's available all the time. And with follow-up, a trained counselor will be able to talk to the individual and ask, is it okay if I call you back in a day, in 2 days, in a week, to see how you're feeling, to see if I can help you get connected to a counselor, to a service, to checking in with your natural support system or helping you find a support system. to make sure that you know you're not alone, to make sure that people know that there are people who care and there are people available at all times to be able to be responsive to your needs. We appreciate having the ability to speak with you all to help us understand why you will or will not use a service like 988 and what we can do to make sure that we are designing responsive, supportive, approachable systems that New Yorkers, any New Yorkers, will use when they need it. There's a lot of information about 988 that we're not going to give you kind of the boring nitty gritty, but we want you to know that it's there for you. It's there for your loved ones. It's there for you to call for a loved one if you are seeing somebody that you care for suffering and you don't know how to help them and you want to be able to be a shoulder for them to rely on, but may not know how to be present for them or how to help them walk through the pain or the challenge that they're facing. And so 988 can be a service for you to call and talk with somebody about how to be a support for somebody who may not have that support. Denise, I don't know if there's additional information that you wanted to touch on with mobile crisis or kind of next steps with 988, or if folks just want to talk a little bit more about what that system is and if there's any questions.
And Akua, you know, you have a lot of experience with mental health first aid and
Oh, you're on mute, Denise.
supporting mental health first aid and supporting people in learning how to be most helpful in the community. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I can talk about that, and I can also tie it into why 988 is potentially a unique tool that various communities may be really open to. So I've had about 2.5 years of experience doing mental health first aid training programs. And in those trainings, we definitely emphasize the importance of getting connected to hotline supports and resources so that people are aware that there's always help should you need it. And often, just to bring this up, sometimes what comes up in the trainings is people's fear of calling 911 for support, because there's this fear that maybe 911 may not be trained or as supportive in the case of a mental health crisis and may treat the situation as a criminal justice issue and things may escalate. And so we definitely want people to feel that there's hotlines available where you can first connect with a trained counselor who might be able to even de-escalate the situation, who might be able to listen non-judgmentally. And to tie it into one of these speakers, I think it was Fabian, in sharing your story, you mentioned having certain coping skills. And even in the moment of a call, trained counselors can really take a strengths-based approach, and they may be able to help a person identify coping skills that resonate for them. And just having that support can be really helpful in that moment for a person. And so, yeah, some of my experiences involved really listening to community, and it did come up like the importance of people knowing resources. So what makes 988 unique, as Kat mentioned, is that it's a simple number to remember. So that really kind of communicates that we are moving in a direction of combating the stigma around mental health. This is a national investment in maybe changing people's cultural beliefs. We don't have a complicated number to remember. It's 988. If you are dealing with a behavioral health crisis, you're dealing with emotional distress, you can connect with trained professionals. I've been also, I did like some research, and public opinion is suggesting that most people believe that if someone is in a mental health crisis or behavioral health crisis, that may warrant a behavioral health response. a response of trained mental health professionals to support that individual. And if done well, like 988, it's really promising. We already have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, so it's just a transition, increase in capacity, as Kat said. So there's hope in this, and it's a really unique opportunity to give people more options in getting connected to care and getting connected to non-judgmental support, and hopefully giving people more hope.
And we speak about this from the New York perspective because that's the state in which we are looking to implement 988 here locally, but this is a national initiative. So if there are folks on the call who are not from New York, 988 is a service that will be available to you in any state in the US that you visit and call, or have family or friends there. And Akua touched on it, but this is such a pivotal moment for mental health care, because as a nation, there is a spotlight and a recognition that mental wellness is important, that mental wellness is taking a priority to be able to recognize that people hurt in many different ways. And it's not just the physical pain that a doctor can fix or an urgent care can fix, that there is now a real focus on the acknowledgement that mental health matters, and mental health in every person matters. And so 988 nationally is taking the approach that this is something that is to be prioritized, that this is something that will make a difference. And with the input and knowledge and acknowledgement of this changing system, we are so hopeful that this will provide hope that people may not have felt before this time. So there has always been hotlines. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline has been around for a while, but this feels different because there is so much more behind it now. There's the belief in it, there's the federal support in it, and there's all of us and all of you rallying around why this is so critical. And I think everyone on this call, myself included, can say that this is a service that someone at any point in their life could use, because there is always a time where you need to talk to somebody, and you may not always be able to identify who in your life you can talk to, but now there is someone, and someone that can help and connect you and support you and empower you and believe in you when you're not doing that for yourself.
Thank you very much, Katerina, Denise, and Akua. I'm sure that in the next several months, we are going to hear a whole lot more about 988. So we do look forward to hearing that and, hearing more about it. And I think I'd want to bring you guys back to do some more and talk about 988 again, because the audiences also may be different as we go on. So there may be other opportunities coming up, events that we are doing that I think we may want to include you guys to talk about 988 again, if you don't mind. So let me just go back to sharing my screen for a moment. Hopefully we can get this, I can resume the slideshow. So we're coming to the end of our program, and I want to say thank you very much to the DBGM's Board of Directors. We want to extend gratitude to Shana Riley, Melanie Varade, and Dion Mosanto from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, to Akua, Boakye-Yiadom, Denise Balzer, Katarina Gaylord from New York City Office of Mental Health, from Prizm Shyne Project, from Fabian Laveau from Prizm Shyne Project, and Alexander Hardy, Alex, from GetSomeJoy. We will share this link with the YouTube. We will share this to YouTube and get a link and send it to everybody who has attended. So you can also get the list of resources that we have here. I know that Shana shared a list of resources also from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. And just to let you guys know that on December 2nd is celebrating World AIDS Day. We are presenting another forum called World AIDS Day Celebrating Progress, a virtual gathering to acknowledge the advancements in HIV treatment and the effects on LGBTQ+ people of color communities. One of the key highlights of our World AIDS Day event will be talking about a crisis in HIV treatment financing, what you need to know. So there are some significant things that are taking place across the country with respect to HIV that is going to significantly impact a lot of the agencies that provide HIV care in our communities. And we know that predominantly, disproportionately, Black and people of color are going to be affected. So once again, we want to say thank you to everyone who attended and who joined us to share this event with us. We got 2 more minutes to go because we said we would finish at 6:30. Hey.
I'm so sorry, it's Shana. I just wanted to also mention that in that link that is on November 20th is what AFSP called International Suicide Survivors Day. It will be virtual for New York City, but there will also be the LGBTQ version being held on the same day from 10 to 12. And there's a link to register for anyone who may want to participate and share their stories as well. Or just, you know, again, volunteer efforts and participate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shana. Any other thoughts, any comments? Anybody want to share anything? Any thoughts or comments? How they feel? What, you know, what's going on?
I'll speak. You know, I always have something to say, Antoine.
Yes, yes, Katerina. And I think I think Fabian might, yeah, go on. Fabian might come back and give us something in a minute. Go on.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, go on.
I just wanted to say I feel very grateful for this opportunity to be present with you all, to hear your stories, and to just sit with you on this journey. It's been an honor and a privilege. So thank you.
Yes, I think that, thank you very much, Katerina. Akua, it's such a pleasure to meet you again. Okay, and I see Belinda is here. Belinda is one of my dear friends from Guyana. So you understand mental health in Guyana is not a really, you know, we don't talk about that. Denise, welcome again. And so I'm glad that you're here and we're all working together. I'm not sure if Fabian is going to be doing something for us to take us out of this evening's program. Fabian, are you going to take us out to this evening's program? Yes, I can see. Okay, all right now. Hang on, everybody. Hang on. Let's see what Fabian got for us. You got to take yourself off mute, Fabian, or else all of this would be for vain.
All right, 1 second. I'm just getting the background music together for you.
All right, just give us a couple of bars to take us out of here this evening.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Fabian. And thank you, Shana, thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody, Akua, Denise, and Katerina. Thank you guys all very much. And we look forward to seeing you again. Our next event will be December 2nd for World AIDS Day. So thank you guys very much and have a good night.
Thank you all.